All right, let's continue on with our discussion on ethics of management in media. Let's talk about ethical codes and mission statements. First off, what is a code of ethics? These are published statements, often presented as creeds of conduct for an organization and for its members. It is a written down philosophy of how a company conducts itself. Some of the pros and cons of these codes of ethics. Proponents claim that codes of ethics avoid the problems of individual interpretations of matters and moral judgments. It creates this standardization of how a company approaches certain ideas, thoughts, actions, and so on. But opponents assert that codes are a form of self-censorship and are often too vague and general to address moral issues effectively. In other words, they can't adequately address various situations that may come about and could possibly stifle someone else's philosophies or freedoms to act in a manner in which they believe ought to be a more proper way of acting. A distinguishing feature of codes relating to the media industries is their lack of enforceability. Many people criticize the lack of enforceable codes as well as the lack of a universal code of ethics in the media. So there's this idea that, well, on one hand, the code of ethics is there to provide a certain standard. However, the standard is rarely, in some cases, followed. And there's really no recourse, or shall we say, universal recourse if someone breaks the code of ethics. So is it really valid and is it really authentic for that code to exist if the code is not upheld or enforced in some sort of way? Well, we can judge that on a company-by-company basis, I suppose. A mission statement identifies an organization's purpose and values. We talked a bit in class already about mission statements and the broader idea of vision statements. So these are ideas to which we understand who we are and why we exist. It publicly displays the inherent values of an organization as well. Some of the facets of an acceptable mission statement would include the purpose of the organization. Again, why are we here? They focus on the product or service the organization provides. It doesn't go off into rather lofty sorts of things that aren't really relevant to why the company exists. And they respond to the needs of various publics with interests in the organization. Who does the corporation serve? And who benefits from the corporation? Keeping those people in mind. The other aspects of an acceptable mission statement would include direction for making decisions and taking other actions. It provides some standardization, if you will, of how things should be handled. It energizes all employees, and it should be enduring, but it should not be resistant to change. The mission statement should be a living document that evolves over time as the company and the people that work in the company and the people that are serviced by the company also evolve over time. Ethical issues in media management. Let's take a look at 4 areas that clearly affect managerial decision making in this section here. First off, serving the market or the marketplace. Radio and television stations are required to serve the public interest. That is a term that the Federal Communications Commission has put out there for broadcast outlets that TV and radio stations do not own their frequencies. They are leased, those frequencies, by the federal government. under condition by the federal government that these stations serve the public interest, which is a rather broad statement that has different interpretations as to what that means. Therefore, the burden on management is to define what is in the public interest and hope that the FCC agrees with them when it comes to license renewal time. Even so, broadcasters have an obligation to their owners and to their stockholders to maintain a profitable business. Yes, we're serving the public interest as broadcasters, but we're also out there by and large to make money. The push for profits can create pressures that may override the needs of the audience, and ethical issues arise when business interests eclipse other obligations. We can talk about this in a desire standpoint that may not necessarily have what we would consider an ethical crisis, such as when a television station or network cancels a rather popular show, and those sorts of things, and the public outcry that happens from those. That's not really an ethical sort of thing, but it's one of those things where the public may not think so favorably on a particular television station or network, or when a popular station on the radio changes formats, that sort of idea. However, there may be situations where the actions of a particular media outlet are done in such a way that it makes people question what the overall motive is, if they're actually being proper in their actions and their conduct in the way that they make certain decisions about programming and personnel and several other different areas. Now, with all of that said, a good manager is going to be able to effectively serve the needs of the public and the needs of the market, although it can be a very delicate balancing act. Sometimes one may win out over the other, and the consequences of such are going to follow based on whatever decision is being made. But the idea is hopefully to keep both parties, quote unquote, happy, satisfied, thinking positively about the company and the decisions that it's making. Controversies over content. Let's get into it. Sexual content. Now, based on the Supreme Court's 2012 ruling, it is clear that indecent content is protected as a form of free speech. So, in this regard, the types of things that some people may believe are things that should be shielded from the public view, in the eyes of the Supreme Court, well, it is freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and therefore it is allowed. However, such content should be restricted to the time period that is known as the safe harbor. These are the hours between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. when children are less likely to be watching television. So there is still this idea of protecting young eyes and ears from adult content, regardless of the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled that free speech wins the day. So you can put certain things on television, just not 24 hours a day. As far as violence is concerned, ultimately managers must determine which programs their audiences will accept. So, you might not find blood and gore on the Hallmark Channel, for example, or PBS Kids. But there are certain places where that sort of content is very much something that their audiences will accept and will also enjoy. So there's that consideration to make. Again, who is your audience? Cater your content to meet the expectations of the audience that you are serving. As far as children's programming goes, a manager of a network-affiliated TV station, they may have some personal moral objections to a program offered by the network. However, the station will, in many instances, continue to air the program to remain in good standing with the network and advertisers who have purchased time during the broadcast. This is something that doesn't get as much consideration as some of the other things like the sex and the violence and things like that, where there may be certain philosophies that are taught within certain types of children's programming that parents may find objectionable, that may even rub certain people within a television station the wrong way, and they have to weigh the pros and cons of running that content and the consequences of that. And children's programming is such a thing where you do have to keep in mind that for a television station, there is a requirement for them to air so much content of children's educational programming in particular throughout the year. So if you, for one reason or another, decide to not air a particular program or a particular episode of a program, there's also going to be the issue of finding some sort of a replacement for that particular episode or program in order to meet FCC requirements for the amount of content that's being shown. So there is also that. Social media content. In many cases, these issues are self-inflicted by individuals sending tweets or inflammatory postings that incite controversy. And we have seen this time and time again, especially in the last several years. Content can also involve photographs or video that may not be factual or taken out of context. It is very easy to be fooled by deepfakes, whether they are created by a particular media outlet or simply just shared by a media outlet, and thereby either wittingly or unwittingly sharing false information. The use of content that a media outlet is not authorized to use has gotten companies in legal trouble as well. A few years ago, iHeartMedia was sued by a lot of different content creators for posting videos and graphics that they did not have the legal right to use, and that has gotten iHeart in a bit of hot water. So, in addition to copyright violations, there's also just the standards of making sure that the things that are being put out are factual, and that they are also in good taste relative to the audience that they are serving, and even sometimes the greater audience that may not normally pay attention to a certain program or TV or radio station. You have to keep that in mind as well, because as we have seen, things that we have done in the past very well may come back to haunt us in the future. Some questions on truth and accuracy when it comes to news and public affairs. Because every effort must be made to present accurate coverage in news and public affairs programming, reporters and editors must carefully verify all facts. It is really becoming increasingly difficult to navigate through the pressures of getting information out quickly, especially in the news world. There is this sense of being first with a story that has been made known to a particular media company. But if the information is not vetted first, it can come back to really dampen the reputation of that media outlet. So taking the time to verify information should still be paramount in news and media outlets prior to just finding a piece of information that's been unverified and just rolling with it. The American media is often charged with being too biased in its presentation of news and public affairs, creating questions of credibility with the audience. If we talk about cable news in particular, most people have their ideas as to where certain media companies lie in terms of their philosophies, their political leanings, and in this instructor's view, that is a sad thing, in that news should be news, should be news. However, we have, as a society, actually kind of grown to accept that certain media companies are going to have a certain spin on how they present news. And that may wind up, as a result, not giving viewers and listeners the full story as to what's going on, and allowing for the viewer to make his or her own judgment as to how they feel about a certain thing that's going on, because they may not have all the facts. The right to privacy. The public's right to know should not impinge on another person's right to privacy. We still have, at least here in the United States, this sense that there are certain things that not everybody needs to know. And there are certain cases where many media companies will have, as part of its standards and practices, that they may not divulge the names of children that are involved in certain types of legal issues. There's also the philosophy that people that are the victims of sexual assaults, their names may not be divulged to protect them. And that's just a small example of different ways where we try, in many cases, to protect the privacy of people. Citizen journalists, news managers, and editors must be very careful in the utilization of such material to verify not only its authenticity, but to maintain the integrity of the news operation as well. Again, it's the idea of verifying the facts before you run with something. Citizen journalism has really helped in getting information out that might not otherwise be made available, but Joe Citizen may not have the same standards and practices in what they put out, their motives for what they put out, and that sort of thing. So we have to be extra careful with that kind of content. Conflict of interest, gifts in exchange for coverage, personal relationships, checkbook journalism. We ought to be avoiding that sort of thing, where, we consider the news and the press to be this free exchange of ideas, as in terms of that we exchange those things freely, as opposed to letting the bias of personal gain or even punishment or retribution from another party keep us from doing what we believe our mission is to do. Confidentiality of sources. News managers are sometimes caught between a reporter's effort to maintain confidentiality and external forces demanding information. There are times where it may be important to divulge certain types of information, but to protect somebody for various reasons, whether it's legal reasons, safety reasons, that sort of thing. And there have been cases where the government has pressured media companies to divulge their sources in order that an investigation may be able to go forward. And most media outlets have held to the idea that they should be allowed to protect the sources of information they have, so that the opportunities for corruption from certain parties would be limited in some fashion. But there's also the sense that sometimes there might be a case where the confidentiality of a source may have to be breached in terms of a certain overall safety or national security sort of issue. We have to balance that. Pressures from advertisers. Advertisers typically object if a story presents their products or services in a negative manner and often threaten to pull future advertising from the facility. So what happens when your largest advertiser gets caught up in a scandal and you report it? You might wind up losing an account over that. What's more important to you, the money or the integrity of your journalism? So ethics in sales and marketing now. Responsibility to the audience. Media-related sales departments must maintain the truth in all commercial announcements. And by the way, as far as that goes, that is something that is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. They maintain the standards and make determinations in terms of truth in advertising, that claims being made truly are what an advertiser says they are. Responsibilities to one's conscience. Salespeople who exhibit strong ethical principles will be received as professionals, enhancing their self-confidence and their self-esteem. So there's, being an honest person in business, delivering on the things that you promise as much as is possible. And when you can't deliver, that you own up to that and make retribution for that. Responsibility to customers. Confidential and proprietary information about advertising clients are entrusted to salespeople. It's not a good idea to go to Piggly Wiggly, for example, to get them on the air as an advertising client. Then you learn about some sort of strategy that they use in their promotions and marketing, and then run across the street to Food Lion and share that information with the folks at Food Lion. That just would not look very good for the salesperson, for the media company. Salespeople are obligated to serve their clients, to provide for their best interest, to guide them through what would be the best practice for the advertiser in terms of their campaigns, in terms of their budgets, to make the most of what they are doing, spending their advertising dollars. Salespeople should avoid making promises to clients that they cannot keep. Deliver on the things that you say you're going to do. And advertisers want more accountability and better audience measurement tools. They want to see how well their advertising is being effective. They want to see ratings numbers. They want to see response from the investment that they are making in spending those advertising dollars. Other issues in sales and marketing include responsibility to the community. Sales professionals are representative of many different communities, including a global community, a business community, an industry community, and a local community. So the salesperson is not just a cog that works for the company. They are individuals as well, and they will receive accolades and or backlash for some of the things they do as a person, and those things can impact the company as well as the company sometimes impacting the individual. So there's that sense of personal integrity and personal motive that a salesperson also needs to keep in mind. And again, responsibility to a company. The salesperson becomes the face of their company and to their clients in that regard. So when a salesperson does not act in a way that exudes integrity, it can rub off in a negative way on the corporation as a whole. Implementing an ethics program, a suggested 4-step plan to implementing a program of ethics. So first off, state the mission. Each company needs a mission statement that clarifies the purpose of the organization, not only for employees, but for the public as well. This helps, again, to establish why the company is there, why they exist, what do they set out to do, and how do they plan on doing it, and then to stick by that particular mission in practice. Second, clarify the values. of the organization. Values should be clear and understandable because they communicate a great deal about the company's attitude towards ethics. It should not be overly lofty sort of language, but it should be stuff that is easy to understand and easy to follow. The values should be publicly posted on the company website and on other platforms in terms of it being an accountability measure. Create a code of ethics. A written code of ethics clarifies the company's position on ethical principles. Again, it creates a standard in terms of what a company sees as acceptable and not acceptable in terms of certain practices and certain philosophies. And fourthly, develop an ethics program. And this has several different aspects to it to keep in mind. Complete the necessary basic information such as mission statement, values, and code of ethics. Orient all new employees to the ethical principles of the company. Make sure that when new employees are onboarded that they know right away where the company stands on certain things. Conduct ethics seminars for all levels of management using participatory decision making. Don't just print it and expect people to understand exactly what is expected. Make sure that there are opportunities to engage in discussion and to put certain ideas into practice to make sure everybody's on the same page. Take time to discuss ethical issues in management and in staff meetings. Again, communication, very key here. Maintain an open door policy with all employees regarding ethical concerns. It should be welcomed. That certain things are questioned. Again, for the sake of clarity, for the sake of making sure that certain things are understood, and sometimes these discussions could cause a needed change in the way that a company operates. Finally, regularly evaluate your ethics program as you would any other managerial program. This should be done at least on an annual basis, because even if you have currently the best code of ethics and mission statement and everything else, again, our society evolves, and sometimes there may be necessary change that needs to happen, that we create a different way of thinking about things because our world is continually changing. So there you go. There's the notes for chapter 3, and you should know what to do at this point. Get those notes and study questions done. Take a look at the survey. Be prepared when we get together in class to discuss certain things. Bring your questions, bring your thoughts, bring your concerns. And when we get together, especially on this particular chapter, let's also keep in mind that there's all sorts of different opinions and points of view out there, and we need to be respectful and objectively talk about these things and listen as well. I mean, who knows? We might be able to influence one another and maybe even solve the world's problems. All right, we probably won't do that, but it'll be fun. It'll be engaging. See you in class.